The morning sun of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the barren training grounds of the Galactic Defense Academy. Commander Vexthor, a tall Velcrin with silver skin and 3 eyes, stood on the observation platform watching the cadet teams assemble below. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for satisfaction among his species. This year's war games would be particularly interesting. 5 different species had sent their best young warriors to participate. The Velcrin prided themselves on logical thinking and careful planning. The Quilix moved as one mind across multiple bodies, their coordination perfect. The Morthan were known throughout the galaxy as master strategists. The Drellian cadets brought centuries of military tradition. And then there were the humans. Commander Vexthor's third eye focused on the human team. They were the first from Earth to ever attend the academy. 4 young humans stood together, looking small compared to the other species. The shortest was a female named Sophie Turner, barely reaching the chest height of the nearest Velcrin cadet. Beside her stood Amy Richardson, who kept scanning the horizon with keen eyes. Carlos Bennett was checking their equipment with quick, efficient movements. Their team leader, Jake Morrison, stood with his hands on his hips, grinning like he was about to enjoy himself. "Attention all cadets!" Vexthor's voice boomed across the grounds. "Today's exercise will test your ability to think under pressure. You will design and build a complete planetary defense system. You have 6 standard hours." A murmur went through the assembled cadets. 6 hours was barely enough time to plan properly, let alone build anything. Each team will receive 1 crashed supply shuttle and basic sensor equipment. Vexthor continued. "The planet surface provides raw materials. Your goal is to create a defense that can withstand simulated orbital assault. Begin now." The alien teams immediately gathered in tight circles. The Velcrin pulled out datapads and began calculating. The Quilix formed a living computer, sharing thoughts instantaneously. The Morthan started drawing diagrams in the dirt. The Drellian cadets opened their ancient tactical manuals. The humans did something completely different. "All right, we've got 1 hour," Jake said loudly. 1 hour? Amy laughed. "The assignment says 6. "Yeah, but we're going to do it in 1, Jake replied. "Because I want to see their faces when we finish early." The other human cadets nodded like this made perfect sense. Instructor Krillix, a Morthan assigned to observe the humans, felt his temperature drop in confusion. This was not proper military procedure. "Sophie, you take communications and sensors," Jake said rapidly. "Amy, scout the terrain and find defensive positions. Carlos, we need traps and surprises. I'll handle the physical construction." "Got it," all 3 said simultaneously. Then, without any further discussion, they scattered in 4 different directions. Krillix's scales rippled in alarm. "Stop! You must plan first. You must coordinate." But the humans were already running. Sophie had grabbed the sensor equipment and was sprinting toward a rocky outcrop. Amy had disappeared over a ridge to the east. Carlos was examining the crashed shuttle's fuel tanks with concerning interest. Jake had produced a multi-tool from his belt and was attacking the shuttle's hull plating. "This is highly irregular," Vexthor said from the observation platform. "They are not following any known military doctrine," agreed Commander Thress of the Drellian forces. "Perhaps humans do not understand the assignment," suggested a Quilix coordinator. Down on the surface, Jake had already removed an entire panel from the shuttle. He grabbed it with both hands and bent it at a 90-degree angle using nothing but arm strength and leverage. The metal groaned and yielded. Krillix approached cautiously. "Cadet Morrison, you must stop and plan your approach." "I am planning," Jake said, not stopping his work. He moved to the next panel. "I'm planning to turn this shuttle into about 50 defensive barriers. But you have not calculated structural integrity or optimal placement coordinates. We'll figure that out as we go." Jake ripped another panel free. The sound of tearing metal echoed across the training ground. On the eastern ridge, Amy had found what she was looking for. A series of canyons cut through the landscape, creating natural choke points. She pulled out a small camera and started taking pictures from multiple angles. Her mind was already working, seeing how enemies would have to move through this terrain. Near the shuttle's fuel system, Carlos was carefully siphoning combustible materials into empty containers. He had found deposits of mineral compounds in the nearby rocks. His chemistry classes back on Earth were coming back to him. Mix this with that, add heat, and you got a very impressive boom. His instructor had once said Carlos could make explosives from a hardware store and a kitchen. This alien planet was basically a hardware store. Sophie had reached the high ground and spread out the sensor equipment. She started rewiring connections, bypassing safety protocols, and linking everything into a makeshift network. The equipment was designed to work individually, but Sophie was making it work together. She created a communication channel and tested it. Comms check. Her voice crackled through improvised earpieces. Amy here. Found perfect defensive terrain. Carlos checking in. Starting on surprises. Jake, good. About 20 panels removed so far. The other cadet teams were still in their planning circles. The Velcrin had created a beautiful holographic model of their proposed defense. It would take them 4 hours to build if everything went perfectly. The Quilix were still debating the mathematics of optimal sensor placement. The Morthan were reviewing historical battle data to find the perfect strategy. The humans had been working for 30 minutes and showed no signs of slowing down. Vex Thor zoomed in his third eye on Jake Morrison. The human was now carrying hull panels that should require 3 beings to lift. His face was red and covered in sweat, but he kept moving. He had created a pile of shaped metal pieces and was starting to drag them toward the canyon system Amy had found. How is this possible? Vex Thor muttered. Humans are from a death world, Krillix reminded him. Earth has gravity 30% higher than standard. Their muscles are extremely dense. But the speed of their work? They seem to operate well under stress conditions. On the observation platform, the alien commanders watched in fascination as the human team continued their frantic activity. There was no careful planning, no elegant calculations, no perfect formations. Just 4 young humans moving like a tornado had possessed them. And somehow, impossibly, it was starting to look like a defense system. At the 40-minute mark, the canyon system looked completely different. Amy had mapped every cave, every ledge, every shadow that could hide a person or a weapon. She moved through the terrain like water flowing downhill, natural and quick. Her boots kicked up dust as she marked positions with bright emergency flares stuck into the ground. Jake, I've got 18 primary positions and 32 secondary fallbacks, she said into her earpiece. Sending you the coordinates now. Jake was already moving. He had stacked hull panels at different points across the landscape. Each piece of metal had been bent, shaped, or modified to fit specific locations. He grabbed a panel that had to weigh at least 90 kilograms and jogged toward the first canyon position. His breath came hard but steady. Back on Earth, his football coach had made them run drills in the summer heat. This was just another workout. The Velcrin cadets had finally finished their planning phase. They began moving toward their assigned positions with careful, measured steps. Each movement was calculated. Each placement was mathematically perfect. Their instructor nodded with approval. This was how proper soldiers worked. Meanwhile, Carlos had created something that made Krillix want to file a safety complaint. The human had gathered rocks, shuttle fuel, some wire, and mineral compounds into what looked like organized piles of chaos. He was setting them up in a pattern across the outer perimeter. Cadet Bennett, what are those? Krillix asked nervously. Improvised triggered explosives, Carlos said cheerfully. Well, more like really loud noisemakers with some punch. They'll create rock slides when activated. You created explosives in 40 minutes? These? Oh, these are simple. Back home, my uncle taught me to clear tree stumps on the farm. Same principle, just scaled up. Carlos connected another wire. The trick is using the natural landscape. See how these rocks are already unstable? I'm just giving them a reason to fall at the right time. Krillix made a note to review Earth farming practices. They sounded terrifying. Sophie had transformed the sensor equipment into something the manufacturers would not recognize. She had linked every piece together through the shuttle's salvaged computer core. What should have been separate units now functioned as one massive network. Her fingers flew across the makeshift keyboard she had built from spare parts. Network is live, she announced. I've got coverage across 12 square kilometers. Not great, but it'll have to do. That is impossible, said her assigned observer. A Quilix coordinator. Those sensors are not designed to interface with each other. Yeah, I noticed, Sophie said, not looking up. So I made them compatible. Just needed to rewrite some code and bypass the safety locks. The safety locks are there for important reasons. Probably. But we don't have time to do things safely. We have time to do things that work. The Quilix coordinator shared this conversation with the hive mind. The collective response was confusion, mixed with concern. Humans seemed to view safety protocols as suggestions rather than rules. At the main observation platform, more alien officers had gathered. Word had spread through the academy that something unusual was happening. Commander Vexthor found himself surrounded by curious instructors wanting to watch the human team. They have been working for 50 minutes without a break, noted Commander Thress. No rest periods, no careful measurements, no double-checking calculations, added a Velcrin tactical instructor. This is madness. And yet, Vexthor said slowly, look at what they have created. The viewing screen showed the canyon system transformed into a defensive position. Metal barriers created overlapping fields of fire. Sensor nodes provided coverage from multiple angles. The explosive traps formed a perimeter that would channel attackers into kill zones. False heat sources made it appear that defenders occupied twice as many positions as actually existed. It was messy. It was unorthodox. It definitely was not textbook military doctrine. But it was somehow coming together into something that might actually work. Jake had just finished placing the last of his metal barriers when Amy called through the comms. I'm setting up the false positions now. How many heat sources did we have? Grabbed about 40 emergency flares and heating packs from the shuttle, Carlos replied. Also salvaged some reflective material. Perfect. I'm spreading them across the northern quadrants. Anyone attacking will think we have defenders everywhere. The Morthan cadets had begun constructing their defense system. They worked with precision, each movement following the plan exactly. Their instructors praised their discipline. Everything was proceeding according to calculated projections. They would finish in approximately 4 hours and 20 minutes, well within the time limit. The humans had other ideas. All right, team check, Jake said. What's our status? Sensors and comms are fully operational, Sophie reported. I've set up the central hub in Cave System 3. It's protected and has clear lines of sight to all our positions. Trap network is complete, Carlos said. I've got 32 trigger points. Some are obvious decoys, some are real surprises. Enemy won't know which is which until they step on them. False positions are active, Amy added. I've created heat signatures and movement indicators at 56 locations. Real defensive positions are marked on your maps. Jake looked at his timer. 58 minutes had passed. Then we're done, he said simply. Krillix could not believe what he was hearing. Done? Cadet Morrison, the assignment allows 6 hours. Surely you want to refine your work, optimize your positions, run safety checks? Why? Jake asked. It either works or it doesn't. We'll find out during the simulation. But this is not how military operations function. You must verify, test, confirm. Instructor Krillix, Jake interrupted gently. With respect, this is exactly how humans function. We build fast, we build redundant, and we adapt when things break. Which they will. That's why Amy set up 32 fallback positions instead of the 18 we needed. Sophie walked up carrying her portable control station. System is live and recording. Want me to activate full defensive mode? Do it, Jake said. Sophie pressed several buttons. Across the canyon system, sensors hummed to life. The communication network linked everything together. Status lights glowed green on her makeshift control panel. The human planetary defense system was operational at exactly 58 minutes. On the observation platform, silence fell among the alien commanders. This should not be possible, someone whispered. But possible or not, it was done. The other cadet teams were still working when the human defense system went fully active. The Velcrin had completed approximately 30% of their planned structure. The Quilix were in the testing phase of their sensor grid. The Morthan were carefully positioning their third defensive layer. The Drellian cadets had just begun moving materials to their chosen locations. The humans were sitting in the shade of a large rock, drinking water and eating ration bars. Commander Vexthor did not know what to make of this. Should we inform them the exercise is not finished? They claim their system is complete, Krillix replied, his scales showing colors of doubt. I have inspected it personally. It appears functional, though highly irregular. Appears functional and is functional are two different states. With humans, I am learning that normal rules do not always apply. Jake stretched his arms over his head, working out the soreness from carrying heavy metal panels. His muscles ached in a good way, the way they did after a hard day of useful work. Beside him, Amy was reviewing her map one more time, making small notes about angles and sight lines. Carlos had his eyes closed, probably running through chemical formulas in his head. Sophie was monitoring her control station, watching data flow across screens. Think they'll be impressed? Carlos asked without opening his eyes. They'll be something, Amy said with a smile. Confused, probably. Good, Jake said. Confusion is a tactical advantage. A Velcrin instructor approached their resting spot. Her name was Commander Sella, and she taught advanced defensive theory. She had been observing the humans with great interest since they arrived at the academy. Cadets, I must ask you to explain your methodology, she said. Her translator gave her voice a musical quality. You have completed your task in 1 hour. The fastest any team has ever finished this exercise is 4 hours and 12 minutes. We worked fast, Jake said simply. Yes, but how did you coordinate without planning? Your team separated immediately. There were no strategy meetings, no calculations, no verification protocols. Sophie looked up from her screens. We did plan. We just planned while moving. That is not planning. Planning requires stillness, thought, careful consideration. Maybe for some species, Amy said. But humans think better when we're doing something. Sitting around talking about what we might do just wastes time we could spend actually doing it. Commander Sella's mandibles clicked in confusion. But what if your initial approach was incorrect? What if you built in the wrong locations or used improper techniques? Then we'd tear it down and build it again, Jake said. But faster the second time, because we'd know what didn't work. This concept seemed to physically pain Commander Sella. That would waste resources and time. Not as much as spending 4 hours planning something perfect that fails the first time it's tested, Carlos pointed out. Our way, we fail fast, learn fast, fix fast. The Velcrin instructor walked away shaking her head. She needed to discuss this with her colleagues. The human approach violated every principle of proper military engineering. Yet somehow they had created a functional defense system in impossible time. At the 2-hour mark, the simulation was ready to begin. The Academy's advanced computer would attack each defensive position with the same level of force. Each team would face orbital strikes, ground assault units, and electronic warfare. The simulation was designed to be nearly impossible to defend against completely. Success was measured by how long a defense lasted and how much damage it could inflict before falling. Beginning simulation run, Vexthor announced. First target, Velcrin defensive position. The holographic display showed the Velcrin defense. It was beautiful in its precision. Every angle calculated, every sensor placed for maximum efficiency, every barrier positioned according to mathematical perfection. The simulated attack began. The Velcrin defense lasted 18 minutes. It performed exactly as predicted, inflicting calculated damage before systematic destruction. The Velcrin cadets nodded with satisfaction. They had achieved their projected results. The Quillix defense lasted 23 minutes. The Morthan held for 19 minutes. The Drellian position, built on centuries of tradition, lasted 21 minutes. Acceptable results, Vexthor noted. All teams performed within expected parameters. Now for the human defense, Krillix said. This should be interesting. The simulation locked onto the canyon system. The display showed the human defensive network in all its chaotic glory. Sensors scattered across uneven terrain, metal barriers placed at seemingly random angles, explosive traps in locations that made no tactical sense, and heat signatures everywhere suggesting massive troop presence. Beginning attack sequence, the computer announced. The first orbital strike targeted what appeared to be the main defensive hub. The strike hit perfectly, destroying the position. Except it was one of Amy's false positions. just heating packs and reflective material arranged to look important. The real hub was 2 canyons away, completely untouched. The simulation adjusted and sent ground units toward the next obvious target. They advanced cautiously, and then Carlos's trap triggered. Not the one they expected, the one 50 meters to their left. Rocks tumbled down in a cascade, forcing the simulated units to scatter. Right into the killing zone covered by 3 different defensive positions. Irregular, Vexthor muttered, but effective. The simulation tried electronic warfare, attempting to shut down the human sensor network. Sophie's system responded in a way that surprised everyone. Instead of failing completely when attacked, individual sensors went offline while others compensated. The network fractured into smaller pieces that kept functioning independently. "Why is their network not failing?" a Quilix coordinator asked. "Because it was never designed to work as one perfect system," Sophie explained, watching from below. "I built it to work as 50 small systems that help each other. Kill one, the others adapt." The simulation continued its assault. Every time it destroyed what looked like a critical position, 3 more positions activated. Every time it found a pattern to exploit, the pattern changed. The human defense was not elegant or perfect. It was redundant, chaotic, and frustratingly difficult to completely eliminate. At the 30-minute mark, the simulation was still fighting. At 40 minutes, alien instructors began gathering around the display. At 50 minutes, Commander Vexthor leaned forward in disbelief. The human defense was still operational, still inflicting damage, still adapting to every attack the simulation threw at it. At the 60-minute mark, the simulation was using tactics designed for advanced military operations. The Academy's computer had moved beyond standard assault procedures and started employing strategies meant for veteran commanders. The human defense continued to hold. Commander Vexthor's 3 eyes were all focused on the same display. Around him, instructors from every species crowded the observation platform. Some had abandoned their own cadet teams to watch this impossible situation unfold. "The system should have collapsed by now," a Morthan strategist said. "We designed this simulation to overwhelm any cadet-level defense within 30 minutes. "Perhaps the simulation is malfunctioning," suggested a Drellian officer. "The simulation is functioning perfectly," Vexthor replied. "The human defense is simply not reacting the way we predicted." On the display, another simulated orbital strike hit a human position. The barrier shattered, sensors went dark, and the location appeared neutralized. The simulation's attack units moved forward to exploit the breach. Then they triggered one of Carlos's surprises. The explosion was not large enough to destroy the units, but it created a dust cloud that blinded their sensors. While they were confused, automated defenses from 2 nearby positions opened fire. The simulated units retreated and tried a different approach. They identified what appeared to be the weakest point in the human line, a gap between 2 defensive positions. They advanced carefully, checking for traps. They found 3 obvious traps and disarmed them. Confident now, they pushed through the gap. Amy had planned for this. The gap was intentional. The 3 obvious traps were decoys. The real trap was the canyon walls themselves. When the simulated units reached the center of the gap, Carlos's carefully placed charges triggered a controlled rock slide from both sides. The avalanche buried the entire assault force. "That is not standard defensive doctrine," Commander Thrust stated. "Allowing enemies to penetrate your perimeter is considered a failure. Unless you're planning to trap them inside your perimeter," Jake said from below. He was watching his own smaller display, tracking the simulation's progress. Sometimes, the best defense is letting the enemy think they're winning. The simulation adapted again. It stopped trying to find clever tactical solutions and instead committed to overwhelming force. Multiple orbital strikes hit simultaneously across the entire defensive network. Explosions bloomed on the display like deadly flowers. Half of the human positions went dark. The alien instructors nodded. This was the end. No cadet defense could survive concentrated orbital bombardment. But the human system kept fighting. The destroyed positions had been the obvious ones, the ones that looked most important. The real defensive strength was in the hidden backup positions that Amy had scattered throughout the canyon system. As the primary positions fell, secondary positions activated automatically. Sophie's network had been programmed to expect massive casualties and respond accordingly. How many positions did they build? Krillix asked in amazement. The report said 18 primary and 32 secondary, Vexthor replied, checking his datapad. But I count at least 60 active defensive points currently engaging the simulation. Because we didn't just count positions, Amy explained. We counted every cave, every ledge, every rock formation that could hide a weapon or a person. Jake's barriers are mobile. Sophie's sensors can be moved. Carlos's traps can be reset. Our defense doesn't have fixed positions. It has useful terrain. This concept was revolutionary to the alien military minds. They thought in terms of established defensive lines and prepared positions. The humans thought in terms of useful space and available options. The simulation reached the 75-minute mark. It had destroyed over 60% of the human infrastructure. Any normal defense would be in complete collapse. The human defense appeared to be getting more aggressive. With fewer positions to defend, Sophie had concentrated her remaining sensors and weapons into tighter, more lethal zones. They are adapting in real time, a Velkren tactical instructor observed. As their resources decrease, their effectiveness increases. Humans call this backs against the wall, Krillix said. He had been studying Earth military history since the humans arrived. They fight harder when losing than when winning. The simulation tried psychological warfare. It created false communications, fake reinforcement signals, and misleading tactical data. These techniques worked on most species. The Quillix hive mind could be confused by contradictory information. The Velkren logical processors could be overwhelmed with false calculations. The Morthan strategic thinking could be paralyzed by too many variables. Sophie's response was simple. She ignored all communications not coming from her team. Her network was closed, accepting only verified friendly signals. The simulation's psychological attacks hit a wall of complete indifference. That is paranoid system design, noted a communications expert. That is Earth system design, Sophie corrected. We built our computer networks while fighting each other. We learned to trust nothing. At 90 minutes, the simulation was using its final contingency tactics. These were strategies meant for actual warfare, not cadet exercises. The alien instructors began to feel uncomfortable. The simulation was supposed to be challenging, not actually dangerous. But the human defense held, battered, reduced, operating at minimal capacity, but still functional. Jake's barriers had been repositioned multiple times as positions fell. Amy's false signatures kept the simulation guessing about actual troop strength. Carlos's remaining traps protected the most critical locations. Sophie's network had shrunk to a tiny fraction of its original size, but still provided enough coverage to coordinate the remaining defenses. This is unprecedented, Commander Vexthor said quietly. In 200 years of Academy history, no cadet team has survived the simulation beyond 45 minutes. Human cadets have now survived 97 minutes, Krillix added, checking his timer. On the display, the simulation made its final push. Every remaining asset attacked simultaneously. It was the kind of overwhelming assault meant to end any resistance instantly. Explosions covered the screen. Data feeds went chaotic. When the dust cleared, the human defensive network had finally fallen. Total survival time, 104 minutes. The observation platform was completely silent. Below, the human cadets were looking at their own displays with satisfaction. Not bad, Jake said. We held for over an hour and a half. Could have done better if we had more time to build, Carlos noted. Next time, Amy agreed. Sophie was already taking notes on what worked and what failed. She was planning improvements for systems that no longer existed. The alien instructors did not know how to process what they had just witnessed. Commander Vexthor descended from the observation platform with slow, deliberate steps. His 3 eyes were unfocused, a sign that his mind was processing complex thoughts. Around him, instructors from every species followed in silence. They had all witnessed the same impossible event, and none of them had adequate explanations. The human cadets stood waiting near their demolished defense system. They looked tired but pleased with themselves. Jake had dirt covering his uniform and a bruise forming on his left arm. Amy's boots were worn through in places from all the running. Carlos had burns on his hands from handling improvised explosives. Sophie's eyes were red from staring at screens for too long. They looked like they had been through a war. The other cadets, who had spent their time carefully planning and slowly building, looked fresh and clean by comparison. "Cadet Morrison," Vex Thor said formally, "please explain your team's approach." Jake glanced at his teammates, then back at the commander. "We built a defense that assumed everything would go wrong." "That is not a strategy, that is pessimism." "No, sir, pessimism is assuming things will go wrong and giving up. We assumed things would go wrong and planned for it. Big difference." A Velcren tactical instructor stepped forward. "But your defense had no central command structure. When we analyzed your network, we found it could function even if 70% of components were destroyed. This is inefficient. Resources were wasted on redundancy that might never be needed." "Might never be needed, or might save your life," Amy said. "We didn't know what the simulation would throw at us, so we prepared for everything." "You cannot prepare for everything," the instructor insisted. "It is mathematically impossible." "You can't prepare perfectly for everything," Sophie corrected. "But you can prepare adequately for most things. That's what redundancy does. When one system fails, another takes over. When that fails, a third activates. The enemy has to destroy everything to actually win." Commander Thress of the Drellian forces had been quiet, but now he spoke. "This approach requires enormous energy expenditure. Your team worked without rest for 1 hour. This is not sustainable for actual military operations." "Depends on the operation," Carlos said. "Sometimes you need sustained effort over weeks. Sometimes you need explosive action right now. We're good at explosive action." "But why build so quickly?" asked a Morthan strategist. "The assignment allowed 6 hours. You could have created something even more impressive with additional time." Jake smiled. "Could we, though? Would 6 hours of planning really make our defense 6 times better? Or would we just spend 5 hours arguing about the perfect way to do what we did in 1 hour?" This question hung in the air uncomfortably. Several alien instructors exchanged glances. They had all experienced planning sessions that consumed vast amounts of time for minimal improvement in results. Krillic stepped forward, his scales showing colors of curiosity. "I have studied Earth military history. Your species has a saying, 'Perfect is the enemy of good.' Is this your philosophy?" "Part of it," Amy said. "We also have another saying, 'Done is better than perfect.' We'd rather have a good defense now than a perfect defense never." "But your defense was destroyed," pointed out Aquilix coordinator. "The simulation defeated you eventually." "Eventually," Jake agreed. "After 104 minutes. How long did everyone else last?" The coordinator's collective consciousness rippled with embarrassment. The Quillix defense had lasted 23 minutes. Commander Vexthor raised one long arm for silence. "What troubles me most is not your success, but the implications of your success. For generations, we have taught defensive doctrine based on logical planning and careful execution. You have ignored all of it and achieved superior results. This suggests our entire approach may be flawed." "Not flawed," Sophie said carefully. "Just incomplete. Your approach works great against enemies who follow logical patterns. But what if the enemy doesn't follow patterns? What if they're chaotic, unpredictable, and willing to try things that don't make sense? Then our carefully planned defenses would fail," Vexthor admitted, "as they did against your chaotic assault on the simulation's expectations." A younger Velcrin instructor spoke up. "The simulation itself was confused. It kept predicting human responses based on standard military behavior. When humans did not behave as predicted, the simulation's advantage decreased significantly." "That's another thing we're good at," Carlos said with a grin. "Not behaving as predicted. Back on Earth, we spent thousands of years fighting each other. We got really good at surprising our enemies because the enemy was also human, also unpredictable." "You were saying Earth's violent history is an advantage?" Commander Thress sounded disapproving. "I'm saying we learned from it," Carlos replied, seriously. "We learned that plans fail, equipment breaks, allies disappoint, and nothing ever goes the way it's supposed to. So we stopped expecting things to go right. We started preparing for things to go wrong." Commander Sella, who had tried to understand human methodology earlier, approached with her datapad. I have analyzed your performance metrics. Your team's efficiency rating was 38% compared to standard optimization, yet your results exceeded all other teams by 400%. How is this possible? Because efficiency isn't everything, Jake said. Being 80% efficient at the wrong thing is worse than being 30% efficient at the right thing. We weren't trying to build the most efficient defense, we were trying to build the defense most likely to survive. Vexthor was quiet for a long moment, his 3 eyes focused on each human cadet in turn, studying them carefully. Finally, he spoke. The Galactic Defense Council will need to review this exercise. Your performance has raised questions about our entire training doctrine. Does that mean we passed? Amy asked. Passed? Vexthor's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Cadet Richardson, you not only passed, you have achieved the highest score in Academy history. All 4 of you will receive full honors. The human cadets grinned at each other. Sophie pumped her fist in victory. Carlos let out a whoop of celebration. Amy and Jake shared a high five that confused several alien observers. However, Vexthor continued, you have also created significant work for the instructional staff. We must now determine how to integrate your methods into standard curriculum. The galaxy has been preparing for war against logical enemies. You have shown us that real enemies may not be logical. Glad we could help, Jake said. Help is an interesting word, Krillix muttered. Disrupt our entire military philosophy might be more accurate. 3 months later, officers from 12 different species arrived on Earth for the first cross-training program in Galactic Defense Force history. They came to learn what the aliens were now calling Deathworlder protocols, the art of building redundant systems, planning for failure, and turning chaos into strategy. The human instructors tried their best to teach these concepts, but as one Velcrin officer noted in his report, understanding Deathworlder thinking and actually implementing it are vastly different challenges. They prepare for war, as if the universe itself is the enemy. Perhaps when one's homeworld tries to kill you daily, this is simply practical thinking. In the Academy's Hall of Records, a new plaque was mounted. It commemorated the 4 human cadets who completed a planetary defense in 1 hour and survived